Hello and welcome to another Lord of the Rings Rise to War video. I am the player who plays as the Witch King under the mountain. And today I'm going to try and bring a little bit of positivity back to the game, I think. And also talk a little bit about Sauron. And perhaps a little bit more of the free-to-play side of the games, as well as some other stuff. Look at some battle reports as always. Give a kind of update on where the season's at, although to be honest it's pretty much over. Obviously we've heard on other channels that people are perhaps talking that way, and again I'm not going to get into diplomacy, so that's fine. So it's probably best just to start really. So first things first, I will show you the map. So I don't think the last time I did this we had Dol Guldur, so we now have Dol Guldur. There was a ring war which happened around here, which is quite a cool idea actually. It was the first person to build a fort, sort of like attached to the ring. And we won. So it took us 3 hours obviously, because it takes 2.5 hours for the fort to build. There was a lot of fighting. There was a decent pin there the other day, but realistically I'm pretty sure the Meat Kingdom here actually conceded after about an hour and a half, and their fort got knocked down, which was the one they were trying to defend. We are, I don't think they'd mind me saying this, a slightly stronger kingdom. That's no disrespect to them. We've just got some quite active players in both Axed and Dobie who are pretty strong, to be honest, and we've probably got a couple of the bigger accounts in the game, not just in the server but in the game in general. This is our kingdom here. This is the Echo and Hisp kingdom in the south. This is the Dune Kingdom in the north. And then this is the bank, the loan office, with Atmi's crew, to be fair. And they haven't got a lot of the map left at the moment. And I do feel from a little bit, they've fought pretty hard the last few days. As you can see, there's a lot of red pins. But I think generally the resources and numbers and things like that is starting to get a little bit on top of them. We've had to flip back to this side of the map, obviously after securing all this area around the ring just to keep it safe. Just for the simple fact that they started pushing into Gorgoroth down here. So this is kind of where we're at. As for production and things like that and leaderboards, before I get into positives in the game, it's not necessarily a negative, it's just a baffling part of it. So at the moment we're sat in 10th for personal production, which is handy for making sure we've still got troops. We are actually the highest in production, which I didn't realise until I've just looked. Me second, Axe third, and then you're looking at SPQR. So basically the two other kingdoms are higher than Bank and Debt, to be honest, have been the main threat this season to most other people. So all the others are around a muchness. Don't get me wrong, it's been a strong season, particularly for farming, to be honest. And that's what annoys me a little bit when people say the game's dead, or things like that, and there's so much talk about it, and you see it in world chat all the time, and if the game's really that dead, I don't really understand why people are saying world chat, talking about how dead the game is. We've been pushing this keep for a few hours without war. We haven't really got very far, to be honest, and it's been pretty well defended. It's so hard now to siege a keep while people are actually trying to defend it, to be honest, because if you're anywhere on this tile, if someone comes in with eagles or with a march, it just kills your siege. So my siege got caught earlier on, which was more than a touch annoying. What I was going to touch on about, not a moan, but just for a baffling point of view, unless I am literally missing something or going blind from looking at a small phone screen for too many hours a day playing this game, there is 150 levels on the ring, and there's only 148 points you can put into the ring now, which I don't know how I feel about that. I just kind of don't really see the point in this unless I'm literally missing a skill. If anyone can tell me, that'd be great. So where we at? So first of all, I'd like to talk about a little bit of positivity to the game, because I think there's been a lot of negatives, and it's not 1.0. I think it's still getting the kickback from the fact that it's not the 1.0, the classic version of the game. But to say, I've heard people say it's boring. Now, when it was kind of like before they made the adjustment, and it was, I get the 5-minute occupation of tiles is really annoying. Completely accept that. But now that you can actually kind of path around and you can actually all stack on a tile together, those kind of things, I think that's an improvement. I'm not saying it's perfect, because it's not, and it's not 1.0, but if someone could explain to me the difference between what people used to do with tiling, where they used to just spam tiles with eagles to obviously stop people from marching, and this, which people now moan happens, I'm baffled as to why people feel that way, because there is still a skill involved in this, and I'll try and sort of explain where it is. So this kind of ties into the free-to-play element of the game. So if you're more free-to-play in 2.0, I think there has to be a realisation that you play the game for the community that you play in. You have certain roles within a team which aren't necessarily on the front line, because after 11 seasons, with the greatest respect, a lot of accounts have been bought by other people or anything else, and there are some pretty chunky accounts around. Now, even if you're on the more free-to-play area, if you've played that many seasons, I would argue that you could still fill a competent formation. It's not going to compete at the higher levels, but it'll be competent. And you'll have, sort of two to 3 star golds, some best in slot purple gear, that kind of stuff. It's not going to compete with someone who's got the most fantastic account. And I know that is one of people's most annoying parts of the game, because they used to be able to, say, counter most things with a Dwalin as a T1, which is fair enough. But then, I suppose, from a spender's point of view, rightly or wrongly, if you want to look at it the other way, should your Tier 1 Dwalin be able to wreck someone's Tier 3 completely stacked out gold Kieran? Because it would have done in 1.0. So there was a counter system that worked. And it did allow free-to-play players to get more involved in the more active part of the fight, in which ultimately it's Rise to War, it's not Rise to Farmville. I get it. It's kind of why people play the game. And I fully accept that. But I think, let's just get realistic. There are armies from everyone's kingdom, I would suggest, or whatever game mode that you play, Fellowship, whatever it might be, who have the ability to fight each other, who are the more free-to-play elements, and have some fun, rather than sort of like the big whales pick them off, which tends to happen more than it probably should, to be honest. See if I can just snipe. Basically, I'm sat over here sniping armies, which is a little bit naughty from my sake. I'll try and find a tile where perhaps I can do that. Probably here, I'm guessing. And I'll move a little bit closer to the time. In fact, I'll probably move there now, out of the way. So, sorry, apparently I can't do two things at once, where I'm obviously trying to concentrate and move someone at the same time. So I'll just move there. So I'm back to kind of what you can do as a more free-to-play element of this game. Now, this leads back to this, and this is where we were earlier on. A lot of the more free-to-play elements used to tile people to death, where they would kind of like keep spreading tiles, and they'd make a little line of tiles, and they'd fall halfway across the map, and someone would go, God, this is frustrating, because you've got to then take all the tiles back, etc, etc, etc. You don't have to take all the tiles back anymore, because of the way the dynamics work. You don't have to have connected tiles, so that's fine. But you can make things like roadblocks. So as you can see, this one's been sort of decimated, really. But if all this was blue, which it was earlier on, and you can cut between these two mountains, anyone who's in these forts here, unless they've got flying units, cannot get to defend the keep unless they manage to take one of those tiles to create a pathway like this to get to the keep. Now, that is a vital part of the mechanics of this game now, whether we like it or not, but it's very similar to tiling before, so again, I cannot really see where people's problem is. I get it takes 5 minutes to take this tile, and your tiler could be killed, but in the same way, you are taking someone's main away from the main fight to have to try and get rid of you in this way. The other thing is, if you are on the more free-to-play side of it, you can defend these tiles, which are a very important part of the mechanics. You can get eagles or fell beasts, you can fly around, you can pretty much defend these tiles because they tend to be sort of lower level path for tiles, and that's fine. So again, I get it's not in the main fight, but there is a massive purpose for your fellowship, and you can play the game how you want. You can still get involved in fights in this way, and you can kind of pick your targets a lot more, because you actually get 5 minutes to get there to choose whichever target you want. So I get that. The other part of 2.0 that's stupidly important now, and more so than what I've ever really seen it, is siege. And anyone can siege and have a siege formation and have siege gear. It only has to be green. So I just kind of wanted to point out a few of the more positive things, because I think the game's took a real kick in the last sort of few months. And people, and then you've got the kind of like reverse part of that, where people are saying, "Oh, just stop spending on the game, etc., etc., etc." Well, if people do stop spending on the game, the likelihood of the game will disappear over a period of time, which I don't think anyone really wants. So hopefully the devs will kind of get to a middle ground where they have looked willing to change things lately, and they have kind of done a few things where they've been a little bit out of character for them, where they've actually engaged with people and kind of moved stuff. So let's hope that carries on. Again, I get it may not happen, but just trying to add an element of positivity to what we're trying to do here. The other kind of free-to-play elements that you could get away with is you can constantly fort up to anywhere and everywhere. We just took that hit there. This is my second formation, so I don't necessarily expect it to do fantastically well, but it's done pretty well there, so chalk that one up as a win. And again, it's just stopped the defenders from getting to the keep, so hopefully if we clear this we can still siege. And that's kind of where I'm at with it, really. I've lost my train of thought. The other thing you can do is with your fell beasts or your eagles, whatever it might be, is you can fort anywhere across the map for your fellowship or your kingdom. And anyone can do this. It doesn't have to be a whale, it doesn't have to be a free-to-play player, but I'm just giving things that you can do that are helpful for your kingdom. So I can literally go to here with eagles. I could put a fort here. I could put a fort here and put a fort at the keep. And someone has to come and defend that then, or at least get rid of my fort in case we do come across here, for example. As long as there's a fort attached to the keep, we can try and take the keep or occupy the keep or a crossing, whatever it might be. I'm just saying there are lots of things that people can do to be helpful, which isn't necessarily standing at the front line and getting squished by, anyone in that kind of way. I think there are some great tactics to evolve, because most teams that are still surviving have got whales, and you can work with your whales where, if you're taking a hit here, you can then clear the tiles. The whale can clear any armies for you. You can clear the tiles. You can really be helpful to each other and work as a team, which ultimately is the purpose of the game. And my other point, which isn't really free to play, I suppose, and I'm sure there's plenty of other things that I'll come on to in other videos, but I just kind of wanted to touch on it as a brief thing, because my main thing I wanted to talk about today really was Sauron, more than anything else, and different ways of building him, and how I think he's more of a... if you can get him, I know he's not free to play because he is a tier 3 commander, but if you have got him from all that time, you only need him at R5 to make him effective, and I'm going to try and show that, hopefully. But I'm just trying to suggest that when you sort of analyse the mechanics of the game now, there are lots of things that are sort of the same but have changed slightly. Like all these tiles here are a great way of defending, which is only the same as what people were doing before, is with tiling people to death. It's just a mindset change, I think, is probably what I'm asking for as a community. Yeah, so I just go talk through my barracks, because I'd like to sort of show my barracks every time I'm here, because it tends to change. I've started looking at axe throwers today, and again, this is because of the more, I'll be honest, a more free-to-play side of it. It's, I've got some quite good commanders, but someone who's been consistently hammering me all day with a more free-to-play formation than me, and I think it's worth noting because it's a bit of smart play. And it's impressive, if we're being brutally honest, because it shows someone who is a thinking person. But I'll come on to that in a minute. I probably need some more fell beasts for tomorrow, I guess. Again, we've got some cataphracts and bow knights. I've switched quite a lot to cavalry with a front line. That'll do actually, because 12 hours is probably about right. So I've switched to cavalry with a more front line of something like a war chariot or a troll. And I've actually switched my main formation, which now involves Sauron, which I've kind of alluded to already, but I'll come on to that. I've got rid of all my cold drakes. They didn't die, I just removed them because I couldn't see the point in spending 80 stamina moving a large army that basically just made me a very hittable target whenever I didn't want to be. So I decided to get rid of those. I've started training these guys today, and I'll show you the sort of reports as to why I've started training them today. I probably need to train some crushers tomorrow, or keep trying to convert them. I'm still converting crusher mobs. Really like crushers as a unit, and they're very good. I'm probably going to recall Witch King actually, because I've probably got some stamina on my main now, and other than that I'm about to die, which isn't exactly handy. So let's send Witch King home and probably replace him with Dane in a moment. Yeah, very jumpy around. This is actually kind of half playing the game for once, which doesn't seem to be shown too often on the internet. So that was just to give you some ideas about the more free-to-play of what you can probably achieve as part of your community or your fellowship or whatever you want to call it. But you know, the people who are still playing play for a reason. It's generally the people, but you know, if you're going to make the best of it, I'm kind of give some options of how you do that, I guess. As for merit and things like that, we're still sat quite high up. We're up to 6th again now. We've had a good few fighting days. Learned a lot, and it comes back to this sort of main formation that I was talking about. So the secondary formation now I've started running is this, with my Shadow, my Skullhelm, Gimli, and Witch King is my tank, which is a little bit random because he wasn't supposed to be my tank, but he can tank a little bit. And the R5 kind of really helps against those damage dealers and things like that. So, and then also if I get really lucky, as I talked about in my previous video, you can kind of counter Sauron a little bit, which is quite nice. As you kind of see Sauron more and more now. And then my main, wherever I've been running around with it, I've been winning and losing with it today. To be fair, quite a lot. I've done quite a bit of fighting throughout the last few days, like I say. Here we go. So the main formation now, I've been running this. So I've got my tank. I've actually got a secondary tank at the moment because I'm just checking it out. And then I've got my 2 damage dealers who are doing pretty heavy damage. Now look, if you haven't seen these videos before, my gear is pretty good. It's not top level. I'm running Sauron in a certain way. I'll come on to that in a moment because I'd like to talk more about Sauron. My Dane I'm running like this at the moment. I'm debating whether to put 9 points in this and 10 points in Ironfort at the moment, but I'm kind of sticking with it as it is. I've just changed this because again I'm tinkering. I did have 5 points in this, 10 in here and 9 in here. But I do think he gets more damage out by having 10 points in Skin Changer, rightly or wrongly. And then this isn't my ideal gear for Gandalf the White, so I've actually dropped White Rider because of what Sauron does, and I think if Sauron... My Gandalf's quite slow, so any speedy Sauron, which we'll come to touch on in a moment, can really do me a lot of harm. So I've kind of thought, instead of double bubbling me and stealing White Rider and crippling me that way by actually doing 25% extra damage, and stealing my White Council potentially, because it always seems to land on Gandalf, let's face facts. If you're playing the game at the moment, you'll see that. I figured I would go more into damage with the White and Wizard, and it's coming out about 40 to 60k a fight. And if I think of it logically, pretty much everyone runs Gandalf the White, so I'm always going to run into White Council. It's pretty much always going to be maxed. Okay, so it tends to be about 60%-ish. On top of that, I could run into Gil, and then which I kind of want to run into Gil at the moment, but that's a different story as long as I get the right sort of RNG. So here it is. So the problem I have with White Rider is those first 3 rounds. This looks fantastic, but one, it can get stolen quite easily because my Gandalf's not quick enough. 2 over 4 rounds is great, and that's the one thing I will say is quite handy. And then the number of target formations increases to 3. So my issue is for the first couple of rounds, White Council's pretty much got that covered. So in my head, I feel I'm getting more use from Gandalf dealing an extra 25 to 30k of damage than this extra 25% I'm potentially getting for 2 rounds, even though there's some heavy hits from damage dealers in those 2 rounds from Bjorn's main skill. I need to kind of trial both, but to be fair, Dane's still been doing sort of 200k damage. Now, it might be the fact that my gear is good enough to make this work more than anything else, so I kind of need to test it as a more free-to-play element, but this is the guy who actually has made me think about this today and think about axe throwers and such like, because to be fair, gear wise, I massively outgear this player, and I don't think they'd mind me saying that. And this is where I'm starting to think that people say, oh, there's no counters in formations and things like that. Things are starting to appear. People are starting to realise certain things, like how important unit defence is against damage dealers and things like that. So there is a lot coming out, and I think over a period of time it'll be pretty good. But in truth, I feel I should do better there. But that is actually the first time I've beaten him today. Because earlier on, I was completely perplexed. By one of these fights, wherever it might be. As you see, there's been a lot today, so I'll keep flicking down until I find it. It'll save the world of failure. Right, it was this one here. So, same gear, I'm running units which, at the time, I was trying to tank with some cataphracts and use some bow knights so I didn't take hits, and then use a crusher on Gandalf to get the defense drop in. Also, again, kind of tanky to be fair, a crusher. So, I appreciate I've not got the complete counter system where I should be running 4 cavalry units against those, and I'd probably do a little bit better. But with the gear I have and everything else, and even though he's got a couple of levels on me, I would expect I would do a lot better there. And it kind of got me looking at these guys, because there's a chance they do extra damage, and they can hit anything, plus they do this plus 10% to melee, which a lot of people's troops are melee, or the tanks at least are melee. So if I look at this report, and it's very rare I actually look into the sort of header text, but this sort of troop damage of 18k, 20k, and to be fair, it's all dwarfs, and he's getting some bloodline boosts from here and here. That's a lot of troop damage compared to mine. So 5, 11, 8. And I get they're not there for troop damage, but that's kind of a great differential, and that's a really nice build. I do think axe throwers could actually be quite a good thing. So I'm potentially going to look into doing something like a couple of axe throwers, a ram riders, and a guardian, with putting Falcon in a formation to utilise his R5 skill and try and take those extra hits. I think that could be quite interesting, so I'm going to come on to that in a few days, but I do think axe throwers is a good unit. And then I'm just going to briefly go on to what I wanted to talk about today, which is Sauron, and it comes back to this kind of free-to-play element of, if you've played a lot of seasons, and I appreciate this isn't free-to-play, but with the hammers and things like that, and how people's accounts probably are at that stage, I would personally say that you could probably get an R5 Dane, or a Legendary Gimli potentially, or a Respect 9 Gimli, something like that. And if you're a non-roleplay player, you could probably get a hold of this guy. And if you can get him to R1, even R2, R3, can still be used in an appropriate manner by a free-to-play player to really help you. But if you can get him R5, even better, because you can use the enemy skill to take away this 15% attack, defense, focus. He's immune to stun. Stat reduction affects all 4 formations. So max that out, all 4. Deceive is one of the best skills I think in the game, as long as it hits the right people. This isn't so, like, it's okay. It doesn't really modify fantastically with focus, which kind of brings us on to the other part of the build. But it's this that happens in the pre-battle phase, which is the real sort of kicker. So I'm just going to show you a fight where I was massively outwailed. I say massively, I was pretty outwailed, to be fair. And I've absolutely annihilated him. And this is a Zenith 13 Gil with max gear. It's a Legendary 10 Shadow with decent gear. It's a Perseverance set on Aragon, Respect 12, decent gear again. And there you go, I'll run with those. So it's a well geared combination. Now I've got a few levels on it, granted, but the reason why I did so well here, and this is what I'm talking about with Sauron, if I can just skip to the pre-battle. Now, people are talking about getting as much initiative on Sauron as you can, because then he acts before other people, that's how he steals his White Council, that kind of stuff. But even if he's really slow, he tends to be faster than Gil, which is why I started running Bow Knights and my damage dealers, and this is the perfect reason as to why. So the Madness affects Gil-galad, whatever that might be. So Sentinel, Gil-galad, affected by Madness. Sauron puts all his stuff in, yada yada yada. Gil activates Kingly Cairn, puts it on my Bow Knights. He activates High King, puts it on my Bow Knights. All of a sudden, his elves have got no protection whatsoever. My elves have got a great deal of protection. And Zenith 13 Gil protection is apparently very good. And it just made this army very squishy. If you are free to play, you can put initiative gear on your Sauron, whether it be 1.0 gear or 2.0 gear, and you can stack this stat here, initiative. You will act before other people, and even against the whale, it will give you a bit more of a chance of taking a big chunk out of their army, because you might steal a White Council, or you might steal a Kingly Kin, something like that, where you can actually really help your own army. And this is why I think he's one of the most helpful commanders in the game. I just wanted to touch on it briefly because I'd like to do an individual video on him at some stage, but I thought I'd put it in the middle of this. He's only level 43, but I'm really happy with how this formation functions. And you use him as a tank. So from a gear perspective, you want to stack initiative, and then there's two ways of looking at it. You can either try and stack focus and speed gear, which is fine, or you can literally just use him as a tank where you're looking for as much unit defense as possible. So on mine, I've kind of got a mix, but if I could look at it now from a different angle, I'd probably try and get something like a Cask of the Submerged Isle. I'd probably stick with something like this because I think it's quite decent, but I'd be looking at things like a Reckoning. So I'm just trying to stack unit defense as high as I can, because then you can use him because he's got a really high command stat, so you can refine this for command. And with his high command stat, which he starts at base value, he actually makes a really, really good tank. So he's already got a base commander 180. Witch King's is also pretty high. But he's actually wearing some gear, which is why that's up, so it's 177. But if you look at someone like a Gandalf the White that people, for example, use as a tank, again, 167. So you're looking at stacking sort of a kind of tanky unit like a Troll with Taunt or something like that, or a Great Beast, whatever it might be, even though I don't really like a Great Beast, but people seem to. And then once you stack that command and that defense gear, to be honest, a lot of the time he finds it pretty hard to die, and his troops do as well. So it leads on to a different topic about unit defense, which again I'd like to get into at some stage, but I just wanted to touch on Sauron, that in your main formation, if you have one, and you can stack that kind of really good defense gear on him, or that initiative gear, you give yourself a real chance of staying in the fight, winning the fight, and kind of really giving yourself a chance. And I appreciate it's a tier 3 commander, but if it's something to aspire to be a little bit better in the game, I think he's one of the better people to aspire to, because even at low respect, even at R1, you know, the main skill that you're looking to use is a respect 1 skill. If you can get into R5 bonus, but really you're looking to use this, and you can use that straight away. I could just do another point, because I'd like a point in Lord of Gifts and 1 point in Gorthar as well, really, to be honest. And there are obviously some crazy ones around with high Zenith levels, but that's really all I wanted to touch on today. I think I'll perhaps do another video at some stage where I want to keep trying to bring positivity of what people can do, how they can do it, what they can do to achieve. Just being helpful, because I get that there's a lot of negativity around the game at the minute, and I think there's people trying to struggle with what they can do because of the march mechanics, where you're travelling for longer distances and things like that. I do hope this has been helpful. I would recommend that sort of Sauron setup. I'll probably try and include it again as a standalone video, possibly. But for now, as always, when you're redoing your gear and things like that, always follow your nose.